In this video, we're going to take a look at the Dynamic Dyadic Model and an application of this model with regards to a crisis, and more specifically, the impact of a crisis on your relationship you have with your future self. And we're going to look at some possible remedies of a crisis through the lens of this model to help us illustrate some possible solutions through this model. Just a brief review, the Dynamic Dyadic Model is going to examine the transcendence or ecstasy per social exchange along with the frequency of social exchange between two individuals, because a dyadic relationship is a two-person relationship. And so here we can see on the horizontal axis we have delta, and we're going from a small difference between the two individuals or the two selves to a very large difference between the two individuals, or in this case the two selves. So if we have a small delta, we have a very similar relationship, or the two individuals are similar to each other, versus if we go all the way over to stranger, those individuals between the two are very different from each other. So delta represents the difference between the individuals. And so what this model allows us to see here is the maximum level of total transcendence that can be accomplished in a dyadic relationship. We're calling the level here a friend, represented by the green dot. Now, of course, we can have different levels of total transcendence. We could have a relationship with your current future self, which is a very suffocating relationship, in which there's not much difference between your current self and your current version of your future self. And therefore, there's not generating enough total transcendence because there's not enough difference between the two. We also could have a relationship with your current future self, which is more chaotic. In other words, your future self is too much of a stranger, and you cannot see the connection between your current self and your current future self, which is lowering that total transcendence because there's too much difference between the two. And so here we're going to be taking a look at the impact of a crisis, in this case COVID-19 or the coronavirus. So currently you have some relationship between your current self and your current version of your future self. What happens when there is an impact of a crisis? It's a type of event power. So an event occurs which exerts power over that relationship and changes that relationship. And what happens here is that in some instances, that event can fully sever the relationship that you had with your current version of your future self. And so here we're looking at one of those instances in which the current version of the future self no longer exists because of an event that occurred in your life which severed that relationship you had with your current version of your future self. So for example, maybe you think back to childhood. Your parents moved, in which case you severed the relationships you had with your childhood friends during that period of time. You're no longer able to have those relationships anymore. Maybe you got laid off and your current future self was expecting and was working at that position, but you got laid off. That's an event that occurred which severed the relationship between your current self and your current version of your future self. Maybe you're a college senior planning on going into the job market. All of a sudden the coronavirus hits and your future version of your current self may no longer exist because of the pandemic. And so what can happen here is, depending upon your relationship that you're in and the healthy aspects of that relationship, how healthy that relationship is, will determine how much of this event will impact your relationship. So for example, if you were currently in a suffocating relationship with your current future self and there wasn't much difference between there, you may be over here in that yellow dot. And what can happen here, right, is that crisis can actually improve your relationship with your current, with your future self, because that unknown future self that now exists is different enough to where actually will increase that transcendence. So in the case of a crisis, some people may feel more euphoric in the sense of a crisis, because they were suffocating before, and the crisis has now caused difference between that relationship and therefore led to more total transcendence in that relationship, and they may feel more alive during that relationship. But maybe you are currently having a healthy relationship with your future self, and you are over here in the area of green. What happens in the case of a crisis is that that's going to push into the unknown, and you can cause a difference, an unhealthy difference between that relationship. That can be more mild, represented by the light red dot, more severe, represented by the dark red dot or full red dot. And so we'll be looking at two of those instances. One of them in which now your future self is an acquaintance to you, and then what your future self is a stranger to you. So we're going to be looking at that. What has to happen here on the effect of a crisis is that relationship needs to be rebuilt or reconnected or reformed. You need to have a new relationship with this unknown future self that now exists. So we're going to take a look at these two, one being in the acquaintance and one being the stranger, but both of them trying to increase that total transcendence of that relationship. Okay, so the first one of these is going to be the acquaintance. So in an acquaintance, think about maybe an acquaintance at work, an acquaintance at school, in which case you know a little bit about this person. You've seen this person around, you know some of the habits that this person is going to perform, some general interests, but you've never really taken the time to get to know this acquaintance. What happens here is, under that event causing the unknown future self to exist, still exists at enough level in which case you know a little bit about that future self. It's not fully disconnected. And so what happens here is that you can exert some agenda power here by relating to that future self through different and new avenues. And so the advice here would be to go ahead and date your future self. Get to know your new future self a little bit by taking those small steps that you would with any acquaintance that you have at work or at school. Go by the office, go by the desk, initiate some small talk about the weather, talk about some general interest that you know they have, and just kind of initiate some small conversations with that new version of your future self. You can also take it to the next level here, in which case you want to ask maybe more personal, more intense questions. And so kind of develop those questions. Come up with some questions you might want to ask that acquaintance, such as, right, do they enjoy running? Do they have pets? Right? Just get to know this future self through more formal questions that you can ask, and kind of think about those questions, and then go through that process of just interviewing that new future self. Where would you like to work now that you have different options? What do you really like to do for free time? And just kind of begin to ask yourself and your future self that question. Also, what you can do is, again, take it to the next level here, which is to invite your future self over for dinner. Invite your future self to go running, if you still kind of share that interest. And if you're going to invite them over for dinner, you want to make sure that your house is clean. You want to make sure that you've taken grooming habits. You're keeping up with your grooming, that you are keeping up with your cleaning, that you're really going to invite your future self over. You really want to start making sure that you're taking care of at least the basics and maintaining those basics that you're engaged in. Because what you're really trying to do then, right, if you're really truly dating your future self, is you're trying to impress your future self. You're trying to interact and engage in relationships with your future self, both in your thoughts, your words, and your actions, in which case you're really trying to impress your future self. So dress nice, take care of yourself, and really try to impress your future self because you're going to be dating your future self. So what can happen here, right? If that crisis is causing some difference that's not optimal here, it's pushing you over into the acquaintance level, you can try some of these to kind of get connected and reform that relationship by reaching out and engaging in these interactions that you would with any acquaintance that you have. Okay, so the next level here would be in which that future self gets pushed all the way into kind of chaos, all the way into becoming a stranger to you. Now, the difference here, right, is strangers you don't know much about or anything about. Maybe these are people that you can't currently relate to. They may have completely different hobbies, completely different ways of raising their kids, and completely different ways of interacting with the world around them, and you don't know anything about that. So it's a little bit chaotic because you don't share those same interests, you don't share those same ideas, and you don't know how to interact with that stranger. And so here, right, it's hard to go ahead and initiate conversations with that chaotic future self because you're simply not able to do so because you can't talk the talk. You don't know how to talk to those individuals. So an option here in which you can deal with a crisis. So instead of trying to change the stranger, what you can do is you can engage in a ritual, right, or to exert your own or create your own event, in which case you embody some of that chaos in a contained way. So not in a controlled way, but in a contained way, which is a ritual, which will be discussed in a different video. But here, right, what you're doing is you're going to go ahead and embody some of that chaos in a contained fashion by trying to connect to a different current self. And so the idea here would be to read different books. Pick a book that you never thought that you would be interested in reading. Watch a documentary or a series or a movie that you never thought that you would enjoy. So you're kind of embodying that chaos a little bit to try to connect with that future chaotic self by embodying that in a contained way. Pick up a new hobby, perform a new activity, and attempt to do that. Something that you never thought that you would have enjoyed, never thought you would have liked, and go ahead and just begin to embrace maybe a new activity or hobby. Also, what you can do is change your appearance, and again, temporarily change your appearance. Get a new haircut that you never thought you would get. Get some temporary tattoos that you can put on. Change your hair color temporarily. So get a new outfit that you never thought you would buy. So the idea here, right, is that you are taking on, right, and allowing for some deconstruction of self, which is an important part of a ritual. And so for you're allowing some deconstruction to embody that chaos a little bit in a contained way. So here are some ways in which you can perform your own event, right, in response to an ungranted event power. You can give yourself permission and grant an event power, perform a ritual that allows you to reconnect with that future self a little bit more now that that future self is so different. Okay, so there is just a way to look at the dynamic dyadic model in relationship to some of the stuff that is occurring and how that can inform what is going on with yourself and the world around you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you click subscribe, share it. It may help some other people here, and we will see you in the next video.